other.
It often does. I had a question from a listener on the text earlier asking about the Greens and who's running your show, and I thought they were talking about me, but they weren't. But interesting news this morning that Clive Palmer is setting up his own political party. Interesting for the Territory because he says neither big party cares about Indigenous infant mortality rates. Should that be a more prominent issue on the political radar?
Well, that claim is complete rubbish from Mr Palmer. We've been very focused on Indigenous mortality rates, child mortality. It's one of our key closing the gap targets, and it's where we are seeing real improvement and real progress. So the facts are always good to acquaint yourself with, and I suggest Mr Palmer acquaint himself with those facts.
Do you welcome the party, though? It could perhaps split the coalition vote and make your job easier of getting back into government?
It's all a question for Mr Palmer and the appropriate party registration processes.
One of the issues that's really hurting in the Territory at the moment, I'm sure you're aware, is the cost of living. We pay 20 to 30 cents more than the national average for fuel. We've got the highest rents in the nation, and this week the ABS figures showed an inflation rate 4 times the national average. Will you consider increasing the zone rebate for Territorians to ease the cost of living and promoting economic growth? I know that's something that former Chief Minister Paul Henderson said he'd raise with you.
Well, you are certainly a Territory. Darwin is a place of great economic growth, and that has its upsides and sometimes its downsides, and one of the downsides is cost of living pressures. For example, you see all of the price pressures in housing. So I do understand that it can be very tough for people here to make ends meet. We've worked with those cost of living pressures to try and help families out, doing things like increasing the tax-free threshold, so you can earn $18,200 before you pay a cent of tax. That's in contest in the next election. We support that change, people paying less tax, more than 40,000 of them here around Darwin. And of course the opposition wants people to pay more tax and get rid of that measure.
What about increasing that zone rebate?
Well, it's fundamental in our constitution that tax arrangements are effectively the same around the country. There is the zone tax rebate. We will support the zone tax rebate for the future.
Would you be happy to increase it?
No, we haven't got any plans to change the zone tax rebate. The approach we've taken instead is to do things like cut tax, provide the school kids bonus to help with the costs of getting the kids to school, benefiting more than 10,000 children here. And of course, we did provide an historic increase in the pension too, benefiting more than 8,000 pensioners here. All of that's in contest at the election because the opposition is opposed to each of those measures.
But you've got people like Andrew Twiggy Forrest and Gina Reinhardt calling on separate tax zones or removing capital gains for building a second home in the north. Are you totally opposed to that?
Well, number one, we do have the constitutional requirement that we don't discriminate between parts of the country on taxation arrangements. Number two, I think a number of those measures are not fully thought through. I don't think people in Darwin would say that it was of great benefit to them if people, could own a holiday house and they live in Melbourne or Sydney and that holiday house is capital gains tax free for them. That wouldn't do anything to alleviate property prices in the Darwin property market.
Prime Minister, Territorians are still pretty unhappy with your captain's pick parachuting Nova Peris into the Territory Senate ticket, ousting 15-year sitting Labor member Trish Crossan. You declined the interview to explain that to us here in the Territory. Was that choice an example of poor political judgment?
No.
Not predicting that reaction?
Absolutely the right choice, and I'll be seeing Nova today and be very pleased to see her. I wanted to put my political party, the Labor Party, in a position where we were supporting a female Indigenous candidate, Nova Peris, a great person, also on the votes of Territorians, and of course this is a choice for Territorians come election day, but should she be supported by people in the Northern Territory, she will be the first woman Indigenous Australian to ever serve in our nation's parliament, and for me, I say it's about time.
You farewelled a Labor politician in Townsville while you were there, an outgoing politician. Will you be doing the same with Trish Crossan? Will you be meeting her today?
I'm not sure what you mean by the farewelling a Labor politician in Townsville.
I thought you had an engagement in Townsville or somewhere in North Queensland. No, I must have misread that report.
Oh, no,
anyway,
I see. Sorry, I know what you're talking about. We had Kirsten Livermore, who's a very great friend of mine and the member for Capricornia. She has chosen to not stand again at the next election. She's been in Parliament since 1998 and wants to make a different choice for her and her quite young family, her young children. So we did have a farewell function for her. Trish Crossan will be with me when we're at Charles Darwin University today, opening a new centre there, and I'll be very pleased and proud to be there, and I know that Trish will be very much looking forward to that opening too. She's been a great supporter of the university here.
Has she been badly done by though?
Trish has made a fantastic contribution in federal parliament. She served in the federal parliament for quite some time, and I've obviously taken a decision that I believe is best for the future.
Prime Minister, on grog in the Territory, alcohol-related admissions to emergency have doubled at the Alice Springs Hospital since the banned drinkers register was scrapped. Your government wants it back. The Northern Territory government doesn't. What are you going to do about it?
Well, I am absolutely dismayed by this and made that very clear when I gave the Closing the Gap report to Federal Parliament, which is our once-a-year stocktake, about how we are going against our aspirational targets to change circumstances for Indigenous Australians in education, employment, health, life expectancy. This is a huge retrograde step in the Territory. It means that there's more alcohol abuse, more rivers of grog, and with all of the devastating consequences that has for individuals and local communities. So I'm dismayed and very concerned about it. We will keep pressure up on the Northern Territory government to change its mind and to step away from this incredibly destructive change.
How will you do that?
Well, we engage with the Northern Territory government in a series of ways, including all of the ways in which we support the work of the Northern Territory government for Indigenous Australians. So we'll be making very clear our expectations. I don't want to be in a position where we are continuing to invest at record rates, only to see that good work undermined by the tap being turned back on for the alcohol.
But the CLP has no measures to control the supply of grog. Can you actually intervene other than urge them to do something?
Well, the CLP government was elected by the people of the Territory, so the CLP government does get to make decisions here, but we get to have our voice heard and we get to have a very, very strong say about the use of federal funds and the circumstances in which those funds should be used and should be made available. Once again, there's no point putting lots of money in to try and build communities up and change lives if at the same time the CLP here is turning the tap on for the grog.
So you're talking about possibly withholding funds if they don't agree?
Well, I'll stick with my last statement, but I'm very determined on this matter. I am dismayed and disgusted by what has happened here.
The federal government funded a Medi hotel at Royal Darwin Hospital. The CLP wants to use it for the rehabilitation of problem drunks. Will you approve that?
I understand that there are discussions in progress about this, so I'll leave those discussions to Minister Macklin and, of course, our Minister for Health, Tanya Plibersek.
Are you happy in principle, though, for it to be used for rehabilitation?
I'll let those discussions on all of the details go through. But philosophically, it comes back to the point you and I just discussed. It's the old saying about whether you build the fence at the top of the cliff or you put the ambulance down at the bottom of it. It's always better to prevent harm, and having appropriate alcohol management strategies is about preventing harm, and that's why I very much support and believe that the banned drinkers register should be brought back.
It's 20 minutes to 9, 105.7 ABC Darwin. My guest in the studio this morning, Prime Minister Julia Gillard. Julia Gillard, you're heading out to CDU, as you mentioned there. The Vice-Chancellor has sent an email to students warning them that they'll lose $14 million over the next 5 years. Meanwhile, you're hoping to negotiate with Chief Minister Adam Giles to try to get him to sign up to the Gonski School funding deal. Why would he if that's the result?
Well, on the university funding arrangements, I think it's important that people have got a sense of size and scale here. We have increased funding to the Charles Darwin University since we came to government by more than 90%. More than 90%. That's a lot of money. And each year we provide around $120 million to CDU, and I'm glad we provide it. And we will provide more next year than we provide this year, and more the year after. What is being asked of CDU and universities around the country is that there is a moderate